Awesome. So we have an official debate happening. We have the therapist, we have Arco. For this debate, therapist is taking the position that China and its government are displaying Nazi deeds and could be called the modern day Nazis. Arco's taking the opposition. As always, when we base upon who concedes, we don't get a vocal concession from either participant and put it to a voting poll in which you, the audience, can vote on who you think performed better overall in the debate. No time limit, no moderation. Thank you both for debating. You can get started.
Okay, so I'm gonna start with my argumenting points and how I will proceed. First, China's government and its goals. Second point would be China's way towards one belief, one culture. How China treats its minorities, comparing modern China's actions with those of Nazi Germany. Then how China treats its citizens. Um, yeah, I'm gonna get started with the first one. China's government and its goals. We all know China is officially known as a republic with a communist regime, with a one-party system, which does make them completely totalitarian. Um, I've been noticing that China has been working or looking towards having a state where they can see everything every single citizen is doing. It is also working towards what I would call one belief and one culture. Um, and meaning by that is China having one ethnicity and that being the Han, which makes a majority of the population, about 90%. But in total, they have 56 ethnicities, including the Han. But the rest are all called, or they're all minorities. Um, there are two groups of minorities. One you could say are the model ones who and the other ones are the problematic ones. All minorities aren't treated as a Han, which I would call a normal Chinese person. Um, China's way towards one belief, one culture. I'll explain now what I mean with that. China has Buddhism as like their national belief, um, but certain minorities, like the Uyghurs, do have a Muslim belief, which which differences from like the Mongolians, which also have a Buddhism belief. So like the Uyghurs are separating themselves with that from the rest of China's population. Um, a model minority is one that doesn't speak up to the system and does what the government tells them. Problematic minorities, such as the Uyghurs, um, they are more likely to rebel and not do what the government tells them to, and they're, you could say, a thorn in the eye. China is known or has such ethnicity problems for centuries, and now they're slowly taking actions to those. China is treating its minorities different than the rest of the population. They disrespect the unique cultures like the Mongolians or the Tibetans or the Uyghurs. Um, and you could say they don't have the same worth as the rest. A communist, they say they're a communist regime, but a communist regime is a regime where you could say all are equal, and that's what it's that's where I would say it's a lie calling China a communist regime. Um, yeah. So the one belief, one thing is that China is working towards having Buddhism as their one, and since the Han do take 90% of the population, I see that they do want to have like this one ethnicity, and not these 56 ethnicities, which make them very multicultural. But I think it's very hard to and cruel to kill these very unique cultures that have been populated or have been going. The Uyghurs are, as they're the best example of how China treats its minorities, because since they are a uh, problem, they are put in they're putting in secret concentration camps where they are being brainwashed and tortured into becoming a Buddhist and living like a Han. And I don't know exactly what's going on in those, but that's the information I could gather. And although Mongolia is considered from the Chinese government as a model minority, which doesn't speak up, um, the government of China has recently banned the Mongolian language from schools, and it seems that China's taking more steps going into that, under or supporting my theory of them going towards one belief, one culture. And yeah, I'm comparing now the modern China's actions with and motives with those of Nazi Germany's. The Nazis, as we know, went after Jews, believing them as less worth and trying to kill them, or well, eradicate their ethnicity by killing them, and or making them purifying or having a pure country, Germany, with a pure Aryan ethnicity. China does have, for me, has a similar motive, but they're not as cruel and as brutal as the Germans. Um, they're going after they're not really going after an ethnic supreme population, but they're rather just simply going after one ethnicity and a single one ethnicity, which isn't too far from the Nazis' goal. Just you could say it is different. Um, Nazi Germany eradicated Jews, and but also did research on purifying the population and making them Aryan. Uh, China isn't killing, but they are still killing, but they're rather killing the culture and the beliefs, and trying to unite them and incorporating and sucking them into the rest of China and its economy and its um, its um, its culture. The Nazis didn't invent the concentration camps, but how we look at them and how we view them and what we feel when we hear the word concentration camps does come from the high impact of what Nazi Germany did. The Chinese are also using concentration camps, but they're not using them to kill the minorities. They're rather brainwashing and torturing them into making them a a Buddhist normal Chinese.
Cool. Is that the end of your opening statements?
No,
Okay.
I'm not finished yet. I just
Okay.
can't scroll down because the whole text thing going on. It doesn't want to let me scroll down really. Oh no. Okay. How China treats its citizens and also the Chinese government and its surveillance and the disregarding of their human rights. China, as mentioned, is totalitarian. They're very strict with their citizens, punishing them and suppressing them and holding them like pets. And they're oppressing pretty much every other opinion than the one of the government. They don't care about human rights and certain laws. In China, it is actually a law that you're not allowed to discriminate minorities, but the government itself is doing exactly that, which is quite funny to me. Um, the Since the government holds their citizens at a close line, oppositions or rebellions are it's just not going to happen. China's on its way to, or is implementing a system where your worth is shown as points. Having a lot of points brings advantages, and having not a lot of points will come with restrictions. These points will probably be given through or how someone talks about the government or how productive they are in working. Since China's goal is to see everything, well, see what every single citizen does. It's cruel. You could say it's a mass surveillance with all the camera stuff going on in certain test cities. You could already see. I think that would be the end of my opening statements.
Okay, cool. There's a lot there. I'll give my opening statements, which might address some things and maybe talk about how I think we should be framing the proposition. The proposition is China and its governments are displaying Nazi deeds and could be called the modern day Nazis. And
Yeah.
I'm taking the negation of that proposition. So we call something a Nazi because of the motivations behind doing an action, not just the consequences of the actions. Today, you may all be shocked to hear me negate this proposition that China is not like the Nazis. It seems straightforwardly true that an authoritarian regime imprisoning people en masse would be a slam dunk to be called Nazis. But I hope to demonstrate today that there are meaningful differences between the Nazis and China, and that we should only attribute the label of Nazi when we have good reason to do so. We cannot call the Chinese government the modern day Nazis because it trivializes what it means to be a Nazi. We can say that China is doing terrible things. We can say that we should sanction China or use other diplomatic pressure to get China to change. But calling them Nazis will make the term Nazi so broad as to lose its potency. If China are Nazis, then so is the United States, so is India, so is Russia, so is Iran, and on and on and on. Another reason why we cannot call them Nazis has to do with what it means to be a Nazi. We all agree that Nazis' terrible racism led to some of the most despicable practices in modern history. The beliefs the Nazis hold are not identical to the beliefs the Chinese government holds, and the beliefs of the Chinese government are far more similar to the beliefs of the US government. The reasoning behind these re-education camps, these concentration camps, is because of fighting what the Chinese government calls Islamic extremist terrorism. You might find that term familiar because that has been the guiding motivation behind the United States interventionist wars in the past decade. The rights of the citizens in China are taken away in order to protect the state from ideologically motivated terrorists. At least that's what China is claiming. Now, you can say that China is incorrect regarding their application of protecting the state from ideologues, but that is distinct from the motivations behind the Nazis in China. The motivations are different here. The Nazis saw subsets of people as subhuman and therefore not worthy of any rights, not worthy of any protection, and their resources can be taken and given to the German people. For the Nazis, the concentration camps were a matter of racial purity and genetic fitness for the country. For China, the camps are a matter of reducing terrorism, altering cultural beliefs to be more in line with those in Beijing. This difference is huge. The Nazis' actions were racial and ableist genocide, and China's actions are the destruction of a culture and set of beliefs. A racial genocide and the destruction of beliefs in iconography are not equivalent. We should only call something akin to Nazis if we have good reasons to do so. It is my view that these reasons need to demonstrate an identity equivalence. The important features of that identity comes from what we understand a Nazi to be. The Nazi beliefs are constitutive of racial purity and survival of the fittest, and these beliefs justified the atrocities we saw in the Holocaust. For China, their beliefs are about the protection of the greater good from an existential threat that even the United States government recognizes, namely radical Islamic terrorism. This threat is a threat of beliefs, not of race. And if we say that fighting extremist beliefs, albeit in China's case, their fighting is egregious and violates human dignity, then we utterly morph what it means for some state or group of people to be Nazis. That's the end of my opening statements.
Okay. You said the motives are different. I do still
That's right.
disagree with it to a certain extent because the end result is still the same. It's just another way, and I would call the Chinese government being more smart about it. And I actually have this in my document that I do think that if the Nazis did have the technology that modern China does have, they would have maybe taken a similar way. Probably still killing the Jews, but making it more smart and making them more secret. We don't know what exactly happens in those concentration camps. We can only assume. We only know a little bit. But as I said, the end result is still the same, is destroying a culture and a belief.
So that you said you disagreed that the motivations are different, but then you didn't demonstrate that the motivations were different. You just said that the end result is similar. But even the end result is not identical here because the Uyghurs are not being killed systematically. What's happening is they're basically being brainwashed and then they're returning to society once they're at a certain point. And the motivations can be demonstrated to be different because it's not about the race. So, for example, they're able to come back into society. The Han people are, some of them are going to this district in China and marrying into those families. If it was about racial purity, then the Chinese government would not want ethnically Han people to marry Uyghurs. It's not about racial purity here. And that's an important feature about what it means to be a Nazi. So you need to demonstrate that you disagree with those motivations and how China is doing that for it to be considered a Nazi.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, you're making some good points here. I can't completely disagree with you. Well, similarity of the motives is you are going after a minority, which you could also say were the Jews, and them being less worth. It does somewhat translate into modern day, like being a you're going the Chinese are still going after a minority because they're different. It is somewhat similar to how Nazi Germany went after the Jews. It does have a little bit of different reasoning, and I did mention that, I think. But yeah.
Well, we agree that they're going after a minority group. I think the important feature here is not going after a minority group. For example, in the United States, minority groups were targeted by the government with Jim Crow laws, but we didn't call that Nazism. That was something else. We called it racism. We called it unjust, but we didn't say, okay, these are Nazis. No. There's something particular about what it means to be a Nazi, and China isn't fitting that bill here. So yes, what they're doing is terrible, and we can say this is totally awful. And yes, there's a similarity in that they're attacking a minority group. The reason they're attacking this minority group is because they perceive this group to have a set of beliefs that is endangering the Chinese government. These beliefs being something like independence from the Chinese state, that the beliefs they have in Islam violating what the Chinese see as human rights. So from the point of view of the Chinese government, They're trying to eliminate these beliefs they see as violating human rights as being a danger to people's lives. It's the same type of motivation that George Bush used in the interventionist wars in Iraq. It was to fight violent extremism. And that's still a policy of the United States today. But we're not calling the United States Nazis right now. So it seems to me like the only relevant feature here is that there's people in a camp en masse, but we don't call people in a camp en masse just Nazism. Like people in large camps exist in refugee camps, for example, or camps at the border in the United States, or the internment camps that happened in World War II. We didn't call those the same types of camps that happened in Nazi Germany. It doesn't make the United States Nazis because they did that, unless you are going to bite that bullet and say, yes, they are Nazis, which, okay, fair enough. But I think the motivations behind the Nazis was a type of racial purity. They saw Jewish people as animals. They equated them to animals, meaning they could do what they want with them. They could take their property and give that property to the ethnically pure Germans as a matter of survival of the fittest. In China's case, if a Uyghur changes their beliefs, they're put back in society because they see a Uyghur with these beliefs as a person that is an asset for China, as part of their state, as something that will protect them. So that difference is huge, in my opinion. Big enough, I think, to prevent us from calling China Nazis.
Okay, there's another argument I'd like to make, which I didn't mention until now. China has been shown, or has been making some little moves outside their country, gaining more sea areas, which that is similar to what the Nazis did, slowly going after small countries and sucking them in up, or small territories. So it's not just about the camps. And still, I do believe that you're killing someone if you take away his uniqueness. Because you could say they're pretty much brain dead at a certain point when you just. The Uyghurs have a culture that has been there for decades, even centuries. And just because the Chinese government thinks and is scared of them showing any sort of rebellion or terrorist ideas, doesn't give them the right to strip away their freedom. And the Uyghurs, especially, they're being hunted down and put in these concentration camps and being brainwashed. I would call someone brainwashed, brain dead, out of the simple reason that he's not in his own mind anymore, and he's been put over and over into a single. Sure, but it strips away the uniqueness of a human to think for himself, and the government sees them as voters, as a sheep that they can control too. I said that they keep them at a close leash, and I do believe that the Chinese government displays acts that are similar in not keeping a minority as a pet or as less worth than a human, but as keeping the whole population as pets. Because if you wouldn't keep them at a close thing, and being scared of your own population, you wouldn't put such a mass surveillance system what they're doing, and such a penalty or advantage system with the points. You wouldn't implement that into your country if you weren't afraid of your whole population, since we know that it started with Mao Zedong, and him killing multi-millions and keeping it very strict. And I do agree that they've been handed this regime to some extent, but eradicated, and it's all been secrecy. Like, you're being extremely punished if you speak up about the Uyghurs, if you're like in Beijing and someone hears you talk bad, like, oh, those poor Uyghurs. You're gonna get a visit from the police, and you're gonna get consequences.
Well, okay, so there are a few things that you brought up here that I want to talk about. So you brought up brainwashing someone is killing them, and you also brought up this equivalency with the German Lebensraum, living room.
Yeah.
So the reason why Germany invaded these smaller countries was because of trying to get more living room for the German people. So Hitler was copying what the United States did with indigenous people in North America, where they went into these lands that other people were in, killed those people off, and then took it for like the white Europeans. Germany was like, we can do the same thing the United States did, except we'll move into Russia and do that. And we'll replace the people there with Aryan people. So the point of Lebensraum was to increase the Aryan population and replace the local populations with Aryans because of genetic purity, because they saw themselves as superior by birth, naturally superior. The expansion that China has in the South China Sea and trying to control these smaller islands in the Pacific is all about money. They're trying to control these areas so that they can control the trade that goes through there. If they control the economic zone around an island, they can charge taxes, tariffs would apply, all these things. This is why the United States government has a vested interest in controlling the same waters, because then they can make a bunch of money. So the whole point of this expansion of lands is about money. It's not about racial purity. We can't say that they're equivalent here to the Nazis. The motivations behind those things are different. So that symmetry is broken. The other thing you pointed out is that a brainwashed person is brain dead. So do you think that a person raised in a religious household who is given a set of beliefs from birth is brain dead because they've been brainwashed into that religion? Are all Christians brain dead? Are all Muslims brain dead?
No, but if you
Okay, so this argument
depends
doesn't follow. If the answer is no, that just having beliefs being brainwashed you doesn't kill you, then it doesn't apply to China either. You have to apply it across all, or you special plead here. So because Christians aren't brainwashing people and those people aren't brain dead, then China isn't killing people by changing their beliefs. We can still say it's wrong that they do this, but it's wrong for different reasons. The reason why those reasons are what give something the qualification of it being Nazism or racism or something else. Just brainwashing someone doesn't entail brain death.
True, but as I said, you're taking someone's own thinking away. Like, I've put this in my document. It's a video of a Uyghur or some Chinese person taking a mini video of one of these secret concentration camps. He will face very big punishment from the
I'm not
government.
disagreeing.
And you also didn't go into my argument of the Chinese government and its huge surveillance system, and really going after each citizen if they even speak up or speak something wrong.
Right, because I was addressing those other points and I wanted to
Yeah.
give you time to respond. That's why I didn't go into the surveillance yet.
Okay.
So I wanted to get those things off the table, that Lebensraum is different with the Chinese expansion, and that just brainwashing someone doesn't kill them. Now, we can say it's wrong that the Chinese government is forcing Uyghurs to change their beliefs in order to re-enter society. We can say that's wrong. What I'm saying is that we cannot say that is Nazism, because that's not what it means to be a Nazi. Just brainwashing someone isn't Nazism. Because we can, like, for example, we can look at the prisons that the United States government has for people we think are terrorists, like Guantanamo Bay, where they torture people as well, where they try to change their beliefs from being less radical. We wouldn't call that Nazism, but we are in China's case. I don't understand why we are in China's case, but not in the United States case. And for me, it seems like the reason we call something Nazi has to do with the motivations behind the actions. And it's very clear that Nazism was about racial purity, genetic fitness, superiority, all of this stuff. But in China's case, the motivations are very different. And the consequences are also quite different. They're not killing people in mass just because of their race.
Yeah, I agree. But what does actually is similar with how Nazis treated the Jews is, although you're being brought up from your parents from Christianism, you're being somewhat forced, but you still have the option to change your mind. The what brainwashing is and is happening in China is completely forced, and it shows resemblance in how the Nazis hunted and, well, the difference there, killed Jews. You're taking completely away their freedom of choosing for themselves. You're forcing them. Someone, if the church comes to you and tries to overput, or comes to your house and says, come and join us, you have the option to choose. You're not given that in China, and you weren't given that as a Jew in Nazi Germany.
I'm not disagreeing that the government is forcing people to do this. I'm disagreeing on the motivations and what it means to be a Nazi. Nazi does not just mean authoritarian. We talk about authoritarian governments without calling them Nazis all the time. We can talk about Stalin's government. They're not Nazis. It's Stalinist. We have a term for that.
Yeah.
We can talk about feudal lords that were terrible dictators, tyrants. We don't call Genghis Khan a Nazi, even though Genghis Khan was murdering people in mass, had huge, like, totalitarian governments. The reasons we use these terms are because of motivations behind what these governments are doing. If we are going to say all totalitarian governments are Nazis, it makes the term Nazi so broad as to be meaningless now. Nazis, there's a potency behind the word Nazi. It's a call to action about something being so morally repugnant that we have to stop them. We can't allow this type of thing to continue. We need to go and stop Nazism. We have to go fight them. There's a moral justification for going to war with something like the Nazis. There's a potency behind that word. We have to have good reasons to use it. Otherwise, we paint with too broad a brush. If we're going to say that the motivations, like, I'm not disagreeing that what China is doing is terrible. I am affirming that is terrible. China's government is totalitarian. China's government also has some elements of racism in it. China's culture has racism in it. That's not relevant to the proposition. The proposition is about calling China Nazis and why we would do that. I don't think we've met that standard.
Okay, I have two questions. What would you call then China and its government and how it is? And the second question, aren't the Uyghurs and what's done to them, isn't that worth to stop it? Like, isn't that
Yeah, we should
horrible
stop it.
enough?
We
Well,
should
why
stop it,
isn't it
totally.
being stopped? Why isn't it because you said if it being called a Nazi is a call to action to stop something.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that changing and forcing someone's belief, like it's done in China, is fittingly in that category that it's worse enough that that it's a call to action to stop that. So it does, for me, it still does apply.
Right. Okay, but
in
that's not what
making
I'm
them
saying.
Nazis.
I'm not saying the only meaning behind the term Nazi is a call of action. I'm saying the potency behind the word is call of action. The meaning behind Nazi has to do with the reasons that the Nazis did things. What is identical between Nazis and what other governments do? The meaning behind the word has to have some family resemblance in order for that meaning to refer to the same thing. It's not referring to the same thing. So there are two things going on here. One, the semantic argument, which is my whole negation of your proposition, and two, the potency behind the meaning. Those things are not identical. The potency has to do in different arenas and contexts than just the meaning of the term. So we can talk about how we have to have a call to action for China. We can talk about how it's terrible. We can talk about what we have to do to change that. Go to the UN. We might even need to go to war with China because of what they're doing is so terrible. But that is not the proposition on the table. The proposition on the table is, can we call them Nazis? In order to do that, we have to decide what it means to be a Nazi. It's not just authoritarian. It has to do with this racial purity authoritarianism. That's the important feature about being a Nazi. That hasn't been demonstrated in this case. In fact, you've agreed with me over and over again that the motivations are different. You seem to be affirming my side of the proposition.
No, I'll come to it. The question is, which is the closest description you would have then for China and its horrible deeds?
Oh, more like Stalinism. It's like communist Russia.
How is it similar to communist Russia?
Imprisoning political opponents, trying to brainwash them to have a set of beliefs. For example, the governments were against religions, so they're brainwashing people. They are a communist party, so their goal is to go to this communist form of government. They're doing it incorrectly, but the motivations behind what's happening in China are more similar to the motivations behind what happened in the gulags in communist Russia. We don't call communist Russia Nazis because their beliefs are very different. Their motivations are very different, even though the consequences might have been similar. It's not just the consequences that lead us to label something to be a certain term.
Okay. Well, I will be honest. I didn't know that there was something like the term Stalinism. I was always putting that all in one ball of communism.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you that one. But yeah. Well, I do have one more question.
Sure.
To my theory that if the Nazis had the technology, they may have taken it the same way as China with mass surveillance and disregarding the human rights. What's your standing on that? And also, what's your opinion on what I said earlier of China's government? I will add something. Do see to be superior to their to the citizens and are afraid of them, and that's why they're implementing such a mass surveillance system.
Well, I agree that they have a mass surveillance system, but I don't know what you mean by the government thinks it's superior to their people. What does that mean?
Your mic just quit. I didn't hear you.
Am I clear now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I don't understand what it means for the government to think it's superior to the people. Like, what are you referring to there?
You see that I'll take modern Germany as example. When they're doing something in their house where they discuss new laws, you see that it's public broadcast, and also it's for all to see, and we can all keep voting.
Right.
The communist regime is a one-party system, but the people still do have the right to vote in some matter or form, which
Mhm.
isn't given in China. The Chinese government is totalitarian in taking completely away the choosing of the people, what the people want, and more of what the government want, what Xi Jinping wants.
They do have elections in China. I don't know what you're talking about where they don't. It's just a different form. Basically, they elect people in their local regions who then elect people for higher levels of government. So there's no direct vote of the population for president, but there's direct vote for like the local Politburo, who then has representatives vote for the regional Politburo, who then have people vote for the national Politburo. There are elections in China. It is totalitarian. I don't think that those elections are free. I think that the government is changing it, but you can't say that there aren't elections there.
Okay.
And China is not the only country that has problems with the elections being changed by the government.
Oh yeah, I never said that other countries don't have issues.
Right,
Like
but as it relates to the proposition,
yeah.
we're talking about calling China Nazis.
Yeah.
So like of course it's not really relevant if the elections aren't free. That doesn't make them Nazis all of a sudden.
Mm.
In fact, the Nazis were democratically elected. So you could maybe argue that they would have to be democratically elected in order to call them Nazis, because the Nazis eroded freedoms from a democracy while
Yes.
China existed in a society that already lacks these freedoms. So what's different about Nazis versus the Chinese government is that the Nazis took freedoms away from people. China already has these freedoms taken away from people. It's been the status quo. It is legal, and it's through their court systems that they can do this. The Nazis did it what's called extrajudicial, meaning they do it without the court approval and later made it legal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big difference there between.
Then there's one more argument I have to China, comparing it with Nazi Germany. It's more about I'm going to lean more towards Hitler, and Hitler wanted to have like this youth and this complete the whole population being for the Führer and being for the country and dying for it. I see very, very, very strong similarities in with China there.
With like the worship of the president.
Yes, and how they can call or how they're forcing everyone if needed to arms, which isn't given in most other countries.
Well,
Like
okay.
literally everyone and forcing them.
So you brought this up earlier in your opening statements about how if people in China speak up, they're put in jail.
Yes.
But
Not only jail, but also penalized and
yeah,
publicly embarrassed.
right, yeah, of course. So that happens for sure, but it doesn't happen on the scale that it happened in Germany.
But it still happens. And
Right.
that's the fact.
Right. But it also I mean, it's happening in other countries too, and you're not calling those other countries Nazis.
Well, you have to specify which countries.
Like
Because
the United States.
we have a few hundred countries, don't we?
Yeah, we have several. But the point here that I'm making is that in these countries that are like limiting free speech, we're not calling those countries Nazis. It is not just about limiting free speech that makes something a Nazi or not. It is not just about mass surveillance that makes something a Nazi or not. For example, in the United States, there's this thing called the USA Patriot Act, where the government is allowed to legally look at all your communications without a warrant. All of my text messages are watched. All of my phone calls are listened to. All of my email exchanges are watched. Everything that I do online is surveilled by the United States government. And they have algorithms and things that are looking for keywords to try and find domestic terrorist. Who else is doing that? China. The same thing the United States is doing.
Yeah, but they're doing it behind the population's back and with such a degree to stalking you in your real life, which
It's not
the
a secret in
United States
China, but it's a
doesn't.
secret in the United States. Like, the United States tried to shut that down. When Edward Snowden came out, he was called a traitor, treasonous. He's still called that by some Republicans and the like. But for people who are pro-freedom, they see Snowden as sort of a hero, as like someone who can blow the whistle on the crimes the United States government did. And look what Snowden had to do. He had to leave the country, otherwise he would be put in jail.
Yeah.
But we're saying China is a Nazi, but not the United States government. What happens is we end up special pleading. We need to have good reasons to call them a Nazi.
The difference between the USA and the Chinese government is the USA government isn't totalitarian. In my point of view, the US government isn't totalitarian, but China's is, and they disregard any and the difference between the USA and China is suppressing every other opinion than the one of the leaders and of Xi Jinping, which isn't in the US, where you can have protests, you can state your own opinion. But if you would do that in China, you would be penalized, publicly embarrassed, and heavily punished, which you would have also been.
That happens to a greater degree in China, where if you speak out against the government, you're punished. But the protests do happen. Protests happen in China. People do speak out, and they're not put in jail. Yes, they're suppressed, but protests are suppressed in the United States too. Look at what's happening after George Floyd. People are being killed because they're marching against police brutality.
Yeah, but they're doing it. But
do you know? Okay, think about this. Do you know how many people died in the Hong Kong protest?
Yeah, a lot.
Oh, what's the number then?
I don't know exactly.
Right. Okay. So last I looked, it was something like 2 people died in the Hong Kong protest. 2. Do you know how many people have died since George Floyd protest started?
A lot more, I'd probably guess.
17. And we're going to say that the Chinese government is the authoritarian one that's oppressing people when more people are dying from the United States police brutality?
But the difference
and the United States police brutality is done because of racial injustice, because of racism. It seems to me like the more likely equivalence to Nazism would be the United States government.
The difference is of the protests that the Americans they're violent. They're doing violent protests. They're looting.
It's egregious to kill them. It's egregious to kill someone for stealing a TV.
Yes, sure.
So it's not justified.
But I'd say
it's also not relevant to point out that people are doing bad things, therefore the cracking down can happen, because also the Chinese government is viewing the protest that's happening as being illegal as well, and they're cracking down on it. What the point here is that the meaning behind the word Nazi is not being obtained. That's the point. It doesn't matter if a government is oppressing a people. It matters why they're oppressing the people. That's what makes it Nazism versus Stalinism versus capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And the reasons that China is oppressing the people are not the same as the reasons why Nazi Germany did.
Okay, yeah, I see that. But I'm still on the opinion that the Chinese protests are generally illegal, which isn't the case in America. You can have legal protests, and Also, the killing in the U.S. is because the protests are going out of hand, and I'd say the American police is more brutal, but you also have to keep in mind that they haven't used any I don't think I haven't seen any police force going in with a tank towards the public, which China and its government has shown to do. And I think having a tank pointed against you does make you more peaceful, and does keep you away from being violent towards the police.
How is that relevant to China being called a Nazi?
Yeah, I know it wasn't really relevant, but I wanted to argument that your viewpoint on that.
It was a reductio. I was pointing out that if we use the logic of this equals Nazis, then we would have to say the United States fits that description. It basically, like, your claim is X equals Nazis. Okay, then I'm just pointing out, here are all the things that are X's.
Yeah. Okay.
And it shows that it's ridiculous that we don't call these things X's. It's a reductio ad absurdum. I'm pointing out that view is absurd for these reasons. We don't take those things to be Nazi. Like when I said the United States is a Nazi government, I'm sure a lot of people in the room are like, holy shit, that sounds wrong.
Yeah, because it's
we
been
don't
built.
take that to mean Nazi, right? There's a meaning behind this term. And that's my whole argument here.
Okay.
Do you want to do closing statements and then go to a vote?
I don't really have anything else to say really much anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. Do you want to just go to a vote then?
Yeah, why not?
Well, thank you for debating, therapist.